We are about to walk into the largest museum ever built for a single civilization. It took more than 20 years to finish, cost around $1.2 billion, and holds more than 100,000 ancient treasures. Waiting inside the front hall is a king carved from a single block of granite, 11 meters tall and 83 tons heavy. This is the Grand Egyptian Museum, on the desert edge of Giza, about 2 kilometers from the pyramids themselves. Stay with me, because almost everything in this building has a story that sounds impossible, and most of those stories are true. First, where we are. The museum sits on the Giza Plateau, on the western edge of Greater Cairo, where the Green Nile Valley ends and the Sahara begins. The site covers about 500,000 square meters, which is larger than 80 football fields. From here, it is roughly a 2-kilometer line of sight to the Great Pyramid of Khufu. That closeness is not an accident. The building was placed here so that the oldest wonders of Egypt and the newest one could stand in the same view. The approach begins in a wide open plaza, and the first monument greets you before you even reach the doors. An obelisk of pink granite rises ahead, carved for Ramses II more than 3,000 years ago. It came from the ruins of Tanis, an ancient city in the Nile Delta. But look closely at how it stands, because this obelisk does something no other obelisk in the world does. It floats. The obelisk is mounted on a raised base, held above an open chamber, so that visitors can walk directly underneath it. Egypt calls it the first hanging obelisk. From below, you can look up and see the carved cartouche of Ramses II, the royal name ring that was cut into the underside of the stone. For thousands of years, that inscription faced the earth, hidden from every human eye. Now it is the first thing the museum shows you. It is a clever promise of what this place is about, seeing ancient Egypt from angles no one has seen before. Through the doors, the building opens into a vast atrium filled with filtered daylight. And there he is, Ramses II, carved in red granite around 3,200 years ago, standing 11 meters tall. The statue weighs about 83 tons, roughly the weight of a loaded jet airliner. He stands mid-stride, crowned calm, with the faint smile that Egyptian sculptors gave their kings. Every visitor stops here, because it is almost impossible not to. This statue has lived several lives. It was carved for the great Temple of Ptah at Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt, south of modern Cairo. When the old religion faded, the temple crumbled and the colossus toppled and vanished into the mud of the village of Mitrahina. In 1820, it was rediscovered lying broken among the palm groves. For more than a century afterward, the fallen king simply lay there, too heavy for anyone to move. In 1955, Egypt raised the restored Colossus in the middle of Cairo, in the busy square outside the main railway station, which was renamed Ramses Square in his honor. For half a century, the pharaoh stood in a storm of traffic, ringed by buses, vibration, and exhaust fumes. Conservators warned that the pollution was slowly eating the granite. So in 2006, The 83-ton king was moved again, carried through the streets of Cairo overnight on a giant flatbed convoy while huge crowds turned out to watch. In 2018, he made one final short journey into this atrium, becoming the first artifact installed in the new museum. After 3,000 years of travel, he is home. Take a moment here, because the room itself is part of the show. Daylight falls through high openings and washes down walls faced in translucent alabaster, the same stone ancient Egyptians used for sacred vessels. The scale is deliberate. The ceiling soars so that even an 11-meter statue does not feel cramped. Notice how the light changes as we move around him, catching the crown, then the cartouches on his belt and shoulder. Modern architecture and Bronze Age sculpture holding a quiet conversation. So who was this man? Ramses II ruled Egypt for about 66 years in the 13th century before our era, one of the longest reigns in the ancient world. He fought the famous Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, and then signed one of the earliest peace treaties in recorded history. He built more temples, statues, and obelisks than almost any other pharaoh, from Abu Simbel in the south to the Delta in the north. He outlived many of his own children and was buried in the Valley of the Kings. Egyptians, 1,000 years later, still called him the Great Ancestor. Behind the Colossus, the museum reveals its signature space, the Grand Staircase. It climbs about 50 meters through 6 stories, a slow procession up through the building. Dozens of major statues line the ascent, kings, queens, gods, and sacred stones. The idea is simple and ancient. You approach the treasures the way pilgrims once approached a temple, by rising toward them. So we climb. The staircase display is arranged as a story in 4 acts: the royal image, the houses of the gods, the journey to the afterlife, and the divine king. More than 60 large artifacts stand along the steps, pieces too big for ordinary galleries. Colossal heads, seated pharaohs, columns, and shrine fragments watch you pass. Museum designers usually hide their heaviest objects on the ground floor, because moving them upstairs is a nightmare. Here the engineers did the opposite, and the staircase became one of the most photographed museum spaces on Earth. As we climb, notice the range of faces. Some of these statues are 1,000 years older than others, yet they share the same calm gaze and the same formal pose, a style that held steady for longer than most civilizations have existed. Look at the polish on the hard stone, granite and quartzite shaped without iron tools. Each landing gives a new view back down toward Ramses in the atrium. The higher we go, the more the building starts pointing us toward something outside. At the top of the staircase, a wall of glass frames the reason this museum exists, the pyramids of Giza standing on the horizon. This is the architect's great move. The building is shaped as a chamfered triangle, and its north and south walls line up directly with the Great Pyramid of Khufu and the Pyramid of Menkaure. Stand in the right spot, and the geometry of the museum aims your eye straight at monuments built 45 centuries ago. Very few buildings anywhere are aligned to their subject like this. It turns a window into an exhibit. The design came from one of the most remarkable architecture competitions ever held. In 2002, Egypt invited the world to design the museum, and 1,557 entries poured in from 82 countries. The winner was Hennigan Peng, a small studio based in Dublin, Ireland, run by Royson Hennigan and Shifu Peng, a firm few people had heard of. Their idea beat some of the biggest names in architecture. The plan set the building into the 50-meter step of the plateau itself, so the structure rises with the desert edge, half landscape and half monument. At the top of the climb, the main galleries open up. 12 great halls hold more than 24,000 artifacts, arranged by time and by theme. The rooms walk you from before the pharaohs all the way to the Greeks and Romans, and within each era they explore society, kingship, and belief. Statues, coffins, jewelry, tools, papyrus, and everyday objects sit side by side. It is the deepest single walk through ancient Egypt anywhere in the world. Let us wander. Now for the saga behind the building, because it nearly did not happen. The foundation stone was laid in 2002, and major construction began around 2005. Then history intervened, a global financial crisis, the revolution of 2011, years of political change, a pandemic. Opening dates were announced and missed again and again, while costs climbed past $1 billion, much of it financed through major loans from Japan. Workers and conservators kept going through all of it. By the time the doors finally opened, children born when the project started were old enough to visit on their own. The earliest galleries hold the deep beginnings, the world before the pyramids. Here are pots, palettes, and figures from villages along the Nile, some more than 5,000 years old. Then comes the moment Egypt unifies under one crown, and art suddenly locks into the style everyone recognizes. Watch the cases as we pass, carved ivory, early hieroglyphs, the first royal images. This is a civilization learning to speak in stone. The curators made a quiet but bold choice in these rooms. Instead of showing only masterpieces, they mixed royal treasures with ordinary things, a farmer's tools near a king's statue, a child's sandals near a noble's coffin. The galleries are built to answer a simple question: what was it actually like to be Egyptian? Along the way you meet scribes, brewers, weavers, soldiers, and priests. The pharaohs get their glory, but the museum keeps insisting that a whole people built this civilization. It is history told at eye level. Keep watching the faces as we walk. Painted coffin lids with wide dark eyes, nobles carved in hard black stone, gods with the heads of falcons and lions. Some of these objects spent thousands of years sealed in darkness, and the colors survive as if the painter left yesterday. The museum's glass and lighting were engineered to hold each piece in its own pool of light. It feels less like a warehouse of the past and more like a crowd of people waiting to be recognized. One name hangs over this museum more than any other: Tutankhamun. In November 1922, the archaeologist Howard Carter, after years of empty seasons, found a sealed stairway in the Valley of the Kings. Behind it lay the almost untouched tomb of a king who died around age 19, more than 3,000 years ago. Asked what he could see through the first small opening, Carter famously answered, "Wonderful things." It took his team nearly a decade just to empty the 4 small rooms. The tomb held 5,398 objects: chariots, beds, thrones, jewelry, weapons, food, and the golden mask that became the face of ancient Egypt. For a century, those treasures were split between displays and storerooms, and only a fraction could ever be shown at once. This museum was built in large part to end that. 2 dedicated galleries covering 7,500 square meters were prepared to hold the complete collection together, every object from the tomb in one place for the first time since Carter opened it. A young king who ruled briefly and died young ended up with the grandest museum hall on Earth. Between the headline treasures, give the building itself some attention. The halls run on, more than 80,000 square meters of floor, yet the crowds thin out and whole rooms fall quiet. Concrete, stone, and glass are detailed so cleanly that nothing competes with the artifacts. Sight lines keep opening back toward the pyramids, reminding you where you are. Big museums often exhaust you. This one paces you, like a long trail with overlooks. Now for the museum's most astonishing machine, a full-sized ship older than almost everything else on Earth. In 1954, the Egyptian archaeologist Kamel el-Malik was clearing rubble at the south face of the Great Pyramid when he found a row of huge limestone blocks sealing a pit. Under them, packed in perfect order, lay a royal ship that had waited there for some 4,500 years. It belonged to Khufu, the king who built the Great Pyramid itself. Egyptians believed such a vessel could carry the resurrected king across the sky, with the sun god Ra. The ship had been buried as a kit, 1,224 pieces of cedar wood laid down in logical order. Restorers spent years learning how the planks lashed together. No nails, just rope and joinery, until a vessel over 43 meters long stood complete, the oldest intact ship in existence. For decades, it lived in a small museum beside the pyramid. Then in 2021, the whole ship was sealed in a climate-controlled cage and driven here overnight on a huge, remote-guided transporter built for the job. A boat made to sail the heavens made its last voyage by road, at walking speed. Back on the main floor, the riches simply keep coming. Statues of kings whose names most visitors have never heard, queens and officials, gods in 100 forms. Every era of a 3,000-year civilization has its shelf here. You start to understand why Egypt needed 500,000 square meters. This is not a museum trying to fill space. It is a country finally building a room big enough for its own memory. Beneath and beside the public halls works the part visitors rarely see, one of the largest conservation centers in the world. It opened years before the museum itself, with 19 specialized laboratories for wood, metal, textiles, stone, papyrus, and even human remains. Artifacts arrive through a tunnel about 200 meters long that links the labs to the galleries. Here conservators cleaned Tutankhamun's chariots, stabilized ancient linen, and prepared over 100,000 objects for display. Every treasure upstairs passed through these quiet rooms first. It is the museum's beating heart. As the afternoon light shifts, the building keeps playing with the desert outside. Corridors end in glass, courtyards catch the sun, and the stone floors glow the same sand color as the plateau. The architects wanted the walk itself to feel like moving through the landscape of Giza, rising slowly from the valley toward the pyramids. Somewhere below us, the city hums. Up here, it is stone, light, and 45 centuries. The building's outer face deserves a closer look. The great entrance wall is clad in translucent alabaster stone, folded into sharp triangles like the geometry of the pyramids themselves. Set into it are cartouches, the oval name rings of Egypt's kings and queens, spelled out in hieroglyphs. At night the wall glows softly from within, a lantern on the edge of the desert. Ancient Egyptians prized alabaster for chapels and sacred vessels because it holds light inside the stone. The museum wears the same material as a skin. Step back and the setting explains everything. The Giza Plateau is a limestone shelf raised about 50 meters above the Nile Valley, the hard, dry ground the pyramid builders chose because it could carry millions of tons of stone forever. The museum grips the very edge of that shelf, with the green valley on one side and open Sahara on the other. Khufu's builders and these architects were solving the same problem: how to place something eternal on the border of two worlds. 4,500 years apart, they reached for the same ground. Our walk bends back toward the atrium for one last look at Ramses. It is worth remembering what this building replaces: a beloved but bursting old museum on Tahrir Square where treasures sat crowded in dim halls for a century. Moving a national collection across a city, object by fragile object, was one of the largest museum relocations ever attempted. Some pieces traveled in padded crates, some in climate-sealed trucks, one in a convoy that stopped traffic. Every object in these halls arrived through patience and nerve. The museum opened the way it was built, gradually. Main galleries welcomed visitors in a long trial period first, and about 1.5 million people walked these halls before the official grand opening ever happened. When the full opening finally came, it was staged as a global event, with heads of state on the plaza and the pyramids lit behind them. Egypt had waited more than 2 decades for that night. However long this building stands, it begins something rare. A place built by a civilization to hold the entire memory of a far older one. The pyramids next door suggest these things can last. And that is the Grand Egyptian Museum, an 83-ton king in a hall of light, a staircase of gods, a buried ship that sailed by road, and a window aimed at the pyramids. If you ever come to Cairo, give this place a full day. Your feet will run out before the galleries do. From the Hanging Obelisk to the Alabaster Wall, every stone here is trying to make 4,500 years feel like an afternoon. I hope it felt that way to you too. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.